The tree-shaped candle centerpiece was still burning when my mother-in-law told me the stuffing was dry. I didn't say anything. I just smiled the way you learn to smile after 6 years with a family that grades everything you do like a restaurant they didn't choose to visit. I turned back to the stove, pulled the gravy off the heat, and reminded myself that I had gotten up at 5:30 that morning to brine a 14-pound turkey for a Christmas dinner I had planned, shopped for, and was now cooking entirely alone while 7 members of my husband's family sat in the living room watching football. 7 people, plus my husband, plus his mother who had just decided my stuffing was dry. That's 9 people at my table for Christmas. I want to be honest about how I felt in that moment, because I think it matters. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was something closer to tired, the kind of tired that has nothing to do with sleep. The kind that settles into your shoulders somewhere around year 3 of a marriage and never quite leaves. My name is not important to this story. What matters is that I was 31 years old. I had a master's degree in accounting, and I had not used it in 2 years. My husband, I'll call him my husband, because that's what he was, even at the end, had asked me to stop working when we moved to Phoenix for his promotion. The timing made sense on paper. His salary tripled. We bought a house with a kitchen that had 2 ovens and a wine cooler built into the island. His mother called it a dream kitchen. She said it like she was giving me a gift. I told myself it was temporary. I would take 6 months, maybe a year, settle into the new city, maybe start my own bookkeeping practice on the side. That was 2 years ago. The practice never started. The 6 months became 24. And somewhere in those 24 months, I became the person who planned Christmas dinner for 9 people and got feedback about the moisture content of the stuffing. His sister arrived first that afternoon, around 2. She brought a bottle of wine she made a point of mentioning was expensive and a pie she had picked up from a bakery, still in the box with the bakery's name facing out. She set it on the counter next to the 3 pies I had made from scratch, pecan, pumpkin, and a cranberry tart I had tested twice in November to get the ratio right, and said, "Oh good, more dessert." His brother and sister-in-law came next with their 3 kids. The kids immediately scattered. One of them knocked a glass ornament off the tree and nobody apologized. His brother poured himself a drink and asked my husband if he'd seen the game. His parents arrived last, as they always did, because arriving last meant everyone was already there to watch them come in. His father shook hands and said, "Merry Christmas" to the room. His mother came directly to the kitchen, looked at everything I had going, and said, "You know I would have helped if you'd asked." I had asked. I had asked in November over the phone, and she had said she didn't want to intrude. By 4 o'clock, I had 6 dishes in various stages of completion and a dining room table set with the good china. Her good china, which she had given us as a wedding gift and mentioned at every family dinner since. The kids were loud, the television was louder. My husband was opening another bottle of wine and laughing at something his brother said, and I was in the kitchen alone, same as I'd been since 10 that morning. At 4:45, I asked him to come help me carry dishes to the table. He said, "In a minute." At 5, I asked again. He said the game was almost over. I carried the dishes myself. Dinner was fine, the way Christmas dinner is always fine, when fine means no one said anything overtly terrible, and the food was eaten and the wine was finished. His mother made a comment about the turkey being slightly overcooked. His sister said the gravy needed more salt. His brother's youngest knocked over a water glass and laughed. Nobody moved to clean it up. I got up and cleaned it up. At some point during the pecan pie, my pecan pie, the one I had made from scratch, my husband set down his fork, cleared his throat, and said he wanted to say something. I thought he was going to make a toast. He said he thought we should talk about separating. I need you to understand the specific geometry of that moment. I was sitting at my own table, in my own chair, with a dessert fork in my hand that I had polished that morning. The candle centerpiece was still burning. His mother was sitting directly across from me. His sister was to my left. Everyone was there, 9 people, and he chose that moment, that exact moment, to tell me that he thought our marriage had run its course. He said it quietly, like he was being considerate. His mother looked at her plate. His sister reached for her wine. Nobody said anything. I sat there for what felt like a very long time, though I don't think it was more than a few seconds. And then something in me went very still and very clear, the way a room gets quiet right after a loud sound. I put my fork down on the edge of my plate carefully so it wouldn't scratch the china. I looked at his mother, her china, her son, her family dinner, and I said, I hope someone here knows how to make coffee, because I won't be staying for that. I stood up. I went to our bedroom. I took my laptop, my passport, my social security card, the folder in the file cabinet where I kept my own financial records, my grandmother's ring that I never wore because he said it looked old-fashioned, and a change of clothes. I put all of it into a bag. I walked back through the dining room. They were still sitting there. The candle was still burning. Someone had started eating their pie again. I said, Merry Christmas, and I left. My best friend from college, we've known each other since freshman orientation, since before I knew what a wine cooler built into a kitchen island even was. She lived 20 minutes away. I had texted her from the bedroom. She was standing in her doorway when I pulled up. She didn't ask me a lot of questions that night. She made tea and she let me sit on her couch, and at some point she said, Do you want to talk about what happens next, or do you want to watch something stupid on TV? I said next. The first thing I did was open my laptop and write down every account I could think of. Joint checking, joint savings, the investment account his company set up when we moved, the credit card that was technically in both our names, but that he had always treated as his own. I wrote down balances from memory as best I could, and I wrote down the name of a family law attorney I had looked up 3 months earlier for reasons I hadn't fully admitted to myself at the time. His name was Neil Cassidy. I had found him through a referral from a woman in my neighborhood who had gone through a divorce the previous spring and come out the other side owning her house outright. I had saved his number under NC Consulting, so I wouldn't have to explain it. I called him the next morning at 8:15. He picked up on the second ring, which told me something. I told him what had happened, not all of it, not the stuffing comment, not the 3 pies, not the water glass nobody cleaned up, just the facts. Married 6 years, moved states for his career, stopped working at his request. He announced it in front of his family at Christmas dinner. Neil Cassidy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Did he file anything? I said I didn't know. He said, Then we move first. I want to tell you about the next 48 hours because I think people get the impression that leaving is the hard part, and it is hard. But the 48 hours after leaving, when you're sitting in your best friend's guest room with a bag of your most important documents and a phone that keeps lighting up with calls from numbers you recognize, that's something else. His mother called at 9:15 Christmas morning. I let it go to voicemail. His sister called at 9:40. I let that go too. His brother called twice before noon. My husband himself didn't call until 2 in the afternoon. That told me something also. I didn't listen to any of the voicemails until I was sitting across the desk from Neil Cassidy because he had told me not to delete anything. Don't delete a single message, he said. Coordinated contact from his family after a separation announcement can be relevant. Let them keep calling. They kept calling. 16 calls in the first 24 hours. 9 texts from his mother alone. What they were calling about, I would learn later in pieces. Some from Neil, some from documents, some from a conversation I eventually had with my own mother, who had a way of finding out things through sources she never fully explained. The apartment was the first thing. My husband had signed a lease on an apartment in Scottsdale in September, 4 months before that Christmas dinner. A 2-bedroom unit, move-in ready, furnished with things that were not our furniture. He had been planning this since September, which meant that the Christmas dinner, the turkey I brined, the 3 pies, the gravy his sister said needed more salt, was not a spontaneous announcement. It was a conclusion. The decision had already been made, the apartment already signed, the timeline already set. The dinner was just the moment he had chosen to deliver the news. I think about that sometimes. The fact that he watched me plan that dinner, responded to my texts about whether to do prime rib or turkey, gave an opinion on the centerpiece, and knew the entire time that he would be saying what he said over the pecan pie. What I also learned later was why his family had been calling, the joint investment account, the one I hadn't touched in 2 years. My husband had apparently told his family in September, when he signed the lease, that a division of assets was going to be straightforward, because I had not been working and had not contributed financially to the marriage in 2 years. What he had not considered, or had decided not to consider, was that Arizona is a community property state. What he had also not considered was that my 2 years of not working had directly enabled his career advancement, his relocation, his tripled salary. Neil Cassidy had a word for that contribution. Several words, actually, and they were all legally precise. The family was calling because they had figured out, in those 48 hours, that it was not going to be as straightforward as they had been told. I didn't call any of them back. Neil filed on December 27th. I want to be honest about the months that followed, because I think it would be dishonest to make it sound clean. It wasn't clean. There were nights at my best friend's house where I lay in the guest room and thought about the kitchen in Phoenix with the 2 ovens and the wine cooler and wondered whether I had made the right choices. Not about leaving. I was never uncertain about leaving, but about the years before. About the things I had agreed to, gradually, without noticing exactly when agreeing had become a habit. I started working with a temp accounting firm in January just to have structure. By March, they had offered me a full position. By May, I was doing what I had been doing before Phoenix, reconciliations, audits, the kind of work that used to make me feel like myself. The divorce was finalized in August. Arizona's community property laws and the documented record of my contribution to the household during a period of career-driven relocation meant the settlement was not what my husband had outlined to his family in September. I came out of it with a fair share of the investment account, a settlement that covered the 2 years of income I had foregone, and enough to put a deposit on an apartment of my own. Not in Phoenix, in Denver. I had always liked Denver. I gave my best friend a plant as a thank you gift, which she said was entirely insufficient, and I agreed, and I told her I would spend the rest of my life making it up to her, and she said that sounded about right. The week I moved into my Denver apartment, I received a card in the mail from my former mother-in-law. It was a generic card, the kind sold in grocery store checkout lines. Inside, in her handwriting, she had written, "I hope you're doing well. No apology." No acknowledgement of the Christmas dinner, the dry stuffing comment, the 9 phone calls in 48 hours, the 4 months of her son planning his exit while I planned the holiday menu. Just, "I hope you're doing well." I set the card on my new kitchen counter, a small counter in a small kitchen with 1 oven and no wine cooler, and I looked at it for a while. Then I threw it away, put on a record, and started unpacking. There's a particular kind of freedom that comes not from being rescued, but from finally understanding what you are actually capable of when no one is grading the stuffing. I know what I'm worth now, and I know what I'm not willing to trade it for. I know how to brine a turkey. I know how to read a lease. I know how to save a lawyer's number under a name that doesn't give anything away. And the next time I cook Christmas dinner, it'll be for people who clean up their own spilled water.